Ah, the NES, home of timeless classics like Super Mario Bros., Legend of Zelda, and Mega Man. But for every pixelated gem, there's a handful of games that should have been left on the cutting room floor. I'm Professor Retro, and today we're diving into the deepest, darkest corners of the NES library to bring you the 15 worst games of all time. The game that starts our countdown is Deadly Towers. Released in 1987 by Bordervon, Deadly Towers puts you in the role of Prince Meyer, tasked with the nearly impossible mission of descending the cruel labyrinths of the Northern Tower and destroying 7 evil bells. But here's the catch. Everything in this game wants you dead, and Deadly Towers goes out of its way to make sure you feel at every step of the way. So let's start with the basics. The controls are, let's say, stiff. Prince Meyer's moves with all the urgency of someone carrying bags of cement. His attacks? He throws swords, but they move slow, and you often find yourself playing a dangerous game of dodge the enemy while the sword flies. To add the challenge, the dungeons in Deadly Towers are sprawling and labyrinthine. Without a map or any real indication of where to go, it's easy to get hopelessly lost, and the game has a nasty trick up its sleeve. False floors that drop you into parallel zones. About these parallel zones, well, they're like a nightmarish alternative universe filled with deadlier enemies. You're forced to fend for your life, and getting out is no easy task. Deadly Towers seems to revel in punishing its players like none other. But it's not all doom and gloom. The game does have some intriguing design elements, especially for its time. The concept of having to find and destroy the bells to weaken your enemy, while also leveling up and collecting items, was ambitious for 1987. In some ways, you could even argue that Deadly Towers was ahead of its time. Take the item management, for example. You can find potions, special weapons, and armor upgrades that help, at least a little bit, with survival. But beware, they don't just drop from enemies or appear in the open. You have to buy these items in the in-game shop, which means grinding for currency. That's right, before Deadly Towers will even give you a fighting chance, you got to earn it. Now, this game should come with a warning label: play at your own risk of complete boredom and frustration. You're knighted on a quest, but the controls are so slippery and the enemies are so relentless, it's like playing Dark Souls on roller skates. And let's not even talk about the dungeons. Imagine walking into a room only to be instantly mobbed by enemies you barely saw coming. Deadly indeed. Ah, The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends, a title that should conjure up nostalgic visions of animated mischief and Cold War satire. But does this NES game capture the spirit of the classic cartoon series, or does it leave us begging for mercy from Boris and Natasha? Released in 1992 by THQ, the NES adaptation of Rocky and Bullwinkle had big shoes to fill. The cartoon was beloved for its quirky humor and satirical takes on American culture, delivered by its iconic animal hero, the flying squirrel named Rocky, and his bumbling moose friend Bullwinkle. Now here's how the game starts. You're thrown right into the action with Bullwinkle. Now, anyone who's seen the cartoon knows Bullwinkle is a bit, well, clumsy. Unfortunately, the game seems to take the idea a little too seriously. Controlling Bullwinkle is like steering a cow on roller skates through a minefield. He jumps like he's wearing concrete shoes, and half the time the enemies seem immune to his attacks. Even Rocky, who we can switch to in later levels, isn't much smoother. Rocky can fly, but only when he feels like it, and the controls, well, let's say they're about as responsive as Bullwinkle's brain cells on a good day. Enemies include villains from the show, like Boris Badenoff and Natasha Fatale, who pop up throughout the levels, but be warned, these villains hit hard, and with how tough it is to aim attacks, you'll be seeing the game over screen more often than you'd like. Then there's the bosses. They're either painfully easy or shockingly hard, as if the developers just threw darts at a difficulty chart. You fight Boris, Natasha, and other familiar faces, but they feel more like annoyances than any real challenge. Now, the NES could handle colorful cartoon graphics, DuckTales, but in Rocky and Bullwinkle, the colors are flat and the character designs lack the charm of the animated counterparts. The backgrounds look like they were slapped together last minute. As for the music, it's repetitive and grating, as if it's trying to hypnotize you into playing longer. And while there's a hint of classic theme song, it's buried beneath layers of harsh NES bleeps and bloops. In the end, Rocky and Bullwinkle on the NES is a reminder that not all cartoons need a video game adaptation. Sometimes things are best left on the TV screen. So if you're looking to relive the classic antics of the moose and squirrel, I stick to the original series and let this game gather dust. NES, the game is loosely based off the 1985 film of the same name. In Back to the Future, you play as Marty McFly, racing against the clock, literally, to keep yourself from being erased from history. Your mission? Run down Hill Valley's perilous streets collecting clocks. If you don't collect enough, Marty's photo fades and it's game over. So by now you're thinking, isn't this time travel adventure game? Well, not quite. Instead of any real time travel mechanics, we're given a series of levels that involve spinning, dodging, and throwing bowling balls at enemies who, oddly enough, look like they might be part of some 80s street gang. Let's talk about controls. If you ever tried ice skating uphill, that might be a good warm-up for controlling Marty McFly in this game. The controls are stiff, making it easy to miss those crucial blocks and collide with enemies. And did we mention that one hit makes you lose a life? Yep, one hit. However, to break up the monotony, LGN threw in mini-games. Like the cafe, here Marty needs to block milkshakes being thrown his way. Why, you ask? Nobody knows. These mini-games are the closest thing you get to variety, but even they feel out of place and wildly random. If you're hoping for cool time travel themed levels, well, I've got bad news for you. Every level looks about the same. Streets of Hill Valley with different obstacles and a constant repetitive soundtrack. It's as if the game developers forgot time travel meant, different times. Yes, the Back to the Future soundtrack on NES, a 10-second loop that almost guaranteed to drive you up a wall. Well, the movie's score was iconic, but the game's music makes you want to hop in a DeLorean just to escape it. So, is Back to the Future NES worth a playthrough? If you're into unique challenges and don't mind repeating a 10-second loop over and over, maybe. For everyone else, it's a quirky piece of NES history that reminds us sometimes even time travel can't save a game. To set the scene, the original Ghostbusters movie, directed by Ivan Reitman, was released in 1984 and quickly became a pulp culture phenomenon. The film's mix of comedy, action, and paranormal thrills had everyone talking. So when fans heard that a video game adaptation was coming to the NES, they were ready to strap on the proton packs. But then, the game was released. Ghostbusters for the NES was developed and published by Activision, and let's just say it didn't quite capture the magic of the movie. If you've never played it, brace yourselves. This one's interesting. The gameplay is a blend of driving, resource management, and ghostbusting. Your goal? Earn enough money by catching ghosts to take on the big bad Gozer at the top of Zool building. Sounds simple, right? Well, Ghostbusters on the NES makes it anything but easy. First, there's the driving section. You navigate the Ecto 1 across a top-down map of New York City, and you quickly notice a glaring problem. The car guzzles gas faster than Slimer eats hot dogs. If you run out of fuel, game over. Which means you're constantly driving to the gas station to refuel. Fun, right? Then there's the ghost catching part. You need to buy equipment and traps, but the mechanics are, let's call them, frustrating. Lining up ghosts with your beam and trap feels clunky and is more about luck than skill. And when you finally saved up enough cash to enter the Zool building, you face the notorious staircase of doom. This section is infamous. Your character crawls up the stairs as snail's pace will go swarm around you, and getting hit sends you tumbling down. One mistake and you're back to square one. So what's the final word in Ghostbusters for the NES? It's a relic of its time, an era when movie-based games rarely lived up to expectations. But if you're feeling nostalgic or just want to see how far games have come, give it a try, if you dare. Karate Kid, released in November of 1987 by, of all people, of course, LJN. This game was an early attempt to bring movie magic into the world of video games, but does it deliver a true crane kick to your retro gaming heart, or does it fall face first on the dojo mat? Let's dive in and find out. The game begins with a simple yet bold mission: relive the story of the Karate Kid Part 2. Interestingly, it mixes in some events from the original movie as well. You play as Daniel LaRusso, karate chopping your way through 4 action-packed levels. Sounds cool, right? Well, get ready for a challenge that might make Mr. Miyagi break a sweat. Level 1 thrusts you right into the action, recreating the All-Valley Karate Tournament from the first movie. Here, you face off against opponents in a simple one-on-one format, where timing and butt mashing are key. If you master these basics, Daniel-san, you're ready for more, but if not, prepare for frustrating sweeps of the legs. Now here's where things start to get a bit weird. The Karate Kid NES game transitioned into a platformer, filled with enemies and obstacles. As Daniel, you dodge flying objects, balance on ledges, and fight off seemingly endless waves of karate street thugs. And don't forget about the bonus mini-games. Punching ice blocks or catching flies with chopsticks could be fun distractions, but good luck mastering them. Well, these mini-games do capture some of the film spirit. They often feel out of place and unnecessarily difficult. But hey, maybe they were just put through anticipation, just like Mr. Miyagi would want. Despite its flaws, the Karate Kid on the NES does have a few redeeming qualities. The graphics are colorful and the music captures some of the 80s vibe. But the repetitive combat, frustrating controls, and limited gameplay make it a mixed experience. It's like catching a fly with chopsticks. Fun in theory, frustrating in practice. Where's Waldo is a hidden object game developed by Bethesda Software. Yes, the makers of the well-loved RPG series Elder Scrolls, and published by THQ for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1991. So what's the deal with Where's Waldo? Well, for those of you who don't know, the premise is simple. Find Waldo, hidden in a busy scene filled with multiple characters and distractions. You think it'd be easy, right? Well, buckle up. Because the reality is a bit different. First off, let's talk about the abysmal graphics. I mean, 8-bit graphics can be charming, but in this game it just feels like a sort of mess. The backgrounds are so cluttered that spotting Waldo becomes a frustrating exercise in pixel hunting. There's just so much going on, and instead of fun, it feels a little bit overwhelming. The game consists of a series of levels where you have a limited amount of time to find Waldo among a sea of lookalikes and random characters. Sounds simple enough, right? Unfortunately, the time limit adds unnecessary pressure, turning what could be a relaxing search into a frantic scramble. And when you finally think you found him, surprise, it's just another character and a red and white striped shirt. The game seems to take joy in throwing curveballs, and not in a fun way. Each level feels very similar to the last, with only slight variations in scenery. You'd think they could have added some variety or engaging challenges, but nope. You're just stuck searching for Waldo over and over again. And don't get me started on that music. It's catchy at first, but after a few minutes, it'll make you want to pull your hair out. It loops endlessly, and when combined with the frustration of the gameplay, it can drive you a bit mad. So, in summary though, Where's Waldo for the NES had the potential to be a delightful and engaging experience. Instead, it turned out to be a frustrating and repetitive slog that leaves players more confused than satisfied. If you're looking for a fun hidden object game, you might want to look elsewhere. Athena, released in October of 1986, prepare yourself for a journey through a world that promised adventure but delivered absolute confusion. Athena is an action-adventure game where you play as the titular character, Athena, Mia. However you pronounce that. The story, well, is a classic tale of rescuing a prince and battling through a magical world. Sounds exciting, right? Unfortunately, this is where the excitement ends. One would expect a fluid experience from a platformer. However, Athena's controls are anything but responsive. Jumping feels heavy, and the characters often doesn't react the way you want. Want to attack? Good luck timing your hits, right? Because the weapon system is, well, let's say, it leaves a lot to be desired. Visually, Athena might have been ambitious for its time, but it suffers from a lack of detail and repetitive backgrounds. The sprite work is unimpressive, and you often find yourself wondering what you're looking at. And the music is forgettable at best and irritating at worst. An unfortunate combination for an action game. The difficulty curve, well, let's just say it's more of a brick wall than a curve. Enemies spawn out of nowhere, and the level design often feels like a cruel joke. There's little room for error, and one misstep gets you back to the start of the level. It's enough to make even the most patient gamer want to throw your controller. So what's the final verdict on Athena? It's a game that promised adventure, but delivered frustration. With its clunky controls, uninspired graphics, and punishing difficulty, It's no wonder Athena is often considered one of the lesser titles for the NES. Unless you're a hardcore collector or love a good challenge, you might want to skip this one. Now here's a game one would think my stepson would enjoy, Friday the 13th on the NES, which was released on March 13th of 1989 and based on the iconic film series. Friday the 13th aims to put players in the shoes of a camp counselor trying to survive the wrath of Jason Voorhees. Sounds thrilling, right? Well, let's take a closer look at what went wrong. If you've ever wondered what it's like to play a game where your character feels like they're moving through molasses, look no further. The sluggish controls make it nearly impossible to evade Jason's attack. Trying to run away? Good luck for that. You'll be dead before you can even react. Well, the NES had its limitations. Many games managed to deliver memorable visuals. Unfortunately, Friday the 13th fell short. The character sprites are uninspired and the environments lack detail, making it hard to immerse yourself in the horror atmosphere. And don't get me started on the music. The soundtrack is repetitive and grating, which really can dampen your experience as you try to survive the night. The game's design is another major flaw. Players are tasked with various objectives like lighting campfires and finding weapons, but the randomness of the game makes it feel chaotic and confusing at best. You'll spend most of your time wandering aimlessly, which is far from the suspenseful experience you expect from a horror game. Let's talk about the enemies. Besides Jason, you'll encounter zombies that are just as clumsy as the controls. The AI is so predictable that you can easily dodge them, making encounters feel more like a chore than a challenge. Where's the terror in that? Friday the 13th for the NES is a prime example of a game that had potential, but ultimately failed to deliver. From the frustrating controls to lackluster graphics and design, this game is a relic of a bygone era that's best left in the past. If you're looking for a horror game to play, you might want to skip this one. Total Recall, released in 1990, this game has earned a spot as one of the most infamous titles on the platform. Let's find out why. Developed by Mediagenic, I think I pronounced that wrong, a company that has mixed reputation in the gaming world. Released alongside the Arnold Schwarzenegger blockbuster of the same name, you expect an exciting experience, right? Well, not quite. In the film, we see Arnold as Douglas Quaid, a construction worker who discovers a hidden past as a secret agent. The premise is thrilling, and the action is intense. Unfortunately, the NES game fails to capture any of that excitement. Total Recall is a side-scrolling platformer that attempts to combine action and adventure. You play as Quaid, navigating the various levels that are supposed to represent the chaotic world of Mars. The controls feel clunky and unresponsive. Jumping can be a real chore. And the hit detection is, well, let's just say it leaves a lot to be desired. You'll find yourself getting hit by enemies that you swear you dodged. Now, let's talk graphics. The NES is known for its 8-bit charm, but Total Recall manages to look dull and uninspired. Character sprites are poorly animated, and the environments lack a detail, making the game feel lifeless. Even the cutscenes, which should evoke the film's tension, fall flat and feel disjointed. As for the sound, the music is repetitive and forgettable. The sound effects, let's just say they're not doing any favors for the already mediocre gameplay. One of the most frustrating aspects of the game is the level design. It's confusing, with poorly marked objectives and maze-like layouts. You spend more time wandering around than actually enjoying the game. And don't get me started on the difficulty spikes. One moment you're breezing through, and the next you're facing an onslaught of enemies that feels completely unfair. Arnold deserves so much better. In Total Recall, you spend most of your time crawling through awkward alleys and fighting thugs in a world that looks nothing like the movie, with enemies popping out of every trash can. It's more total regretful than anything. Rambo, released in 1988, well, buckle up, because this one is a wild ride for all the wrong reasons. So let me set the stage. Rambo First Blood Part 2 hit theaters in 1985, and like any blockbuster, it got its share of video game adaptations. The NES version, developed by Pack and Video, promised to capture the action of the film, but did it? Spoiler alert, not even close. The game tries to follow the film's plot, but the execution is a giant mess. You find yourself in missions that feel repetitive and uninspired. The objective system is confusing, leaving you wandering around with no clear direction. You often feel like you're lost in the jungle without a map. Oh wait, that's because you are. The controls in Rambo are clunky at best, the movement feels sluggish, and the hit detection is laughably bad. You find yourself jumping over enemies only to get hit by their bullets, as if the game is mocking you. It's almost like the developers thought, how can we frustrate players today? No, visually, Rambo isn't winning any awards either. The graphics are dull and lack detail, even for the NES standards. Characters look more like blobs than soldiers, and the sound, well, let's just say the music is forgettable, and the sound effects make you wish you had the mute button handy. Overall, Rambo for the NES is a classic example of how not to make a video game. It received poor reviews upon release, and its legacy has been cemented as one of the more disappointing adaptations in gaming history. If you're looking for a great NES experience, you're better off sticking with classics like Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, released in 1990. This game, based on Robert Louis Stevenson's classic novella, is notorious for its gameplay mechanics and overall experience. So let's explore what makes this game so memorable, both good and bad. More or less, not so good reasons. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was developed by Advanced Communication Company and published by, of all people, LJN, a name you might recognize for other beloved titles. This game arrived on the NES on October of 1990, and it quickly became known for its unconventional approach to gameplay. Instead of a standard platformer, players would switch between two identities of Dr. Jekyll, a well-meaning scientist, and Mr. Hyde, his darker alter ego. The game features two distinct phases. As Dr. Jekyll, your objective is to make your way to a wedding, collecting items and avoiding enemies. You need to navigate through a series of side-scrolling levels filled with hazards and obstacles. However, your progress is constantly challenged by the game's unique mechanic, your transformation into Mr. Hyde. When Dr. Jekyll encounters too much stress, he transforms into Mr. Hyde, and this is where the gameplay takes a drastic turn. As Hyde, the goal shifts. Instead of dodging enemies, you now take them out in a rather chaotic fashion, unleashing your darker side, but beware. Your time as Hyde is limited, and you'll need to manage your transformations carefully to reach your goal. It's a tale of two games, both absolutely terrible. As Dr. Jekyll, you're wandering around doing absolutely nothing. Then you turn into Mr. Hyde, and the action somehow becomes worse. Just walking down the streets can get you killed by random townsfolk who hate you for no reason. A baffling bad game. X-Men, which was released on March 15th of 1992. This game was part of the early 90s wave of superhero titles and has a special place in the hearts of many fans. Let's see what makes this game so special. Developed by, another LGN title, we now can see where this is all going. This action platformer lets players control some of the most iconic characters from the Marvel Universe, including Wolverine, Cyclops, Nightcrawler, and Storm. Each character has unique abilities that you'll need to use strategically to advance through the levels. The gameplay is divided into different levels for players to face off against classic villains like the Blob, Magneto, and even the infamous Sentinels. You'll have to navigate through various obstacles and enemies using your character's unique powers to progress. Graphically, the X-Men game captures the essence of the comic book art style of the time, though it's worth noting that it can feel a bit dated compared to other titles on the NES. The backgrounds are colorful and the character sprites are well designed, bringing the X-Men universe to life on the 8-bit console. The soundtrack complements the action with catchy tunes that make each level memorable. However, some players have pointed out that the repetition can become a bit tiresome during extended play sessions. The game is notorious for its difficulty, with challenging enemies and tricky platforming sections. Some players may find themselves frustrated by trial and error nature of certain levels. Despite this, the sense of accomplishment when you finally defeat a tough boss is incredibly rewarding. The X-Men, the superheroes everyone loves, but here they have powers that don't even work. The game is frustrating mess of terrible graphics, confusing level design, and enemies that seem more annoyed by your presence than actually defeated. Up next is the Uncanny X-Men for the NES, released in 1992. Spoiler alert, it's not pretty. Based on the beloved comic series, you'd think the X-Men would translate well to video games, but let's be real. This title feels more like a mutant misfire than a heroic adventure. Let's break this down. You start off choosing from 4 playable characters: Cyclops, Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and Storm. But here's the kicker. Each character feels completely unbalanced. Wolverine might be your best bet, but Cyclops, he feels more like the team's punching bag than a leader. And speaking of punching bags, let's talk about the combat system. It's clunky, slow, and frankly, it feels like you're fighting the controls more than the enemies. Not to mention the repetitive enemy design. It's like they just copy and paste every bad guy they could find. The game is split into several stages, each trying to capture the essence of the X-Men universe, but instead of immersive environments, we get dull, monotonous corridors that feel more like a maze than a superhero's playground. The graphics might look decent in '92, but compared to today's standards, yikes. One of the most frustrating aspects of the Uncanny X-Men is its difficulty. Not challenging difficult, but I'm about to throw my controller out the window difficult. With confusing level layouts, enemy respawns that feel like a bad joke, and a lack of save points, it's a recipe for rage. And let's not forget the soundtrack. It exists. It's mostly forgettable and doesn't really capture the epicness of the X-Men universe. If you're looking for something to get your blood pumping, you might want to look elsewhere. So yes, this is another X-Men game that's an epic failure. The Uncanny X-Men takes everything bad about the first game and makes it worse. Horrible AI, mind-numbing controls, and multiplayer modes so broken you wonder why they bothered. Action 52, released in December of 1991, this game is notorious for all the wrong reasons. So buck up as we explore Action 52, which is often labeled as one of the worst games ever made. Action 52 was developed by Active Enterprises and marketed as a collection of 52 different games on a single cartridge. Sounds great, right? The idea of having so many games in one package was appealing at the time, especially for the NES fans who love variety. But what if I told you that most of these games are unplayable? So let's break this down. Out of the 52 games included, very few are actually worth playing. Most suffer from a lack of polish, absolutely poor controls, and downright bizarre mechanics. For instance, one game called Fruit Catcher has you catching falling fruit with no clear objective or fun factor. And then there's the 4 levels of the 4 Horsemen, which is a confusing mess of graphics and gameplay. Each game feels like a rushed, half-finished project. Glitches? Oh boy, do we have them. Action 52 is riddled with bugs that make any game virtually unplayable, and Cheetah Man, one of the few games that actually receives some attention. You can easily fall through the floor. The hit detection is laughably broken, and if you're looking for a good challenge, you might just find yourself laughing at the absurdity instead. The graphics in Action 52 are another low point. While the NES had its share of impressive titles, Action 52 delivers a jumbled mess of poorly designed sprites and uninspired backgrounds, and don't get me started on the sound. The music is repetitive and annoying, and sound effects are often just plain grating. It's a sensory overload that leaves you yearning for silence. Action 52 has become a cult classic of sorts. It's often used as a benchmark for bad game design, and countless YouTube reviewers have taken it on as a challenge, me included. The sheer audacity of its marketing and the results of its execution make it a fascinating topic in gaming history. So before we hit the number 1 spot, let's look at a few dishonorable mentions. The game is a military-themed shooter where players engage in various missions to combat enemy forces. Now on paper, this sounds like an exciting concept, but in execution, unfortunately, the game missed the target. To put it simply, we find ourselves in a pixelated nightmare. The character sprites are bland, the environments lack detail, making it difficult to immerse yourself in the game at all. It feels more like a half-hearted attempt than a polished product. And don't get me started on the sound. The music is repetitive and grating, turning what should be a thrilling experience into an auditory chore. Tag Team Wrestling, released in 1989. This game promised exciting tag team action, but ended up leaving players with more frustrating than fun. The controls feel clunky and unresponsive, making it hard to pull off even the simplest of moves. You'd think a wrestling game would allow for some fluidity, but here, it's more like trying to wrestle with a bag of cement. The character sprites are bland, and the animations are laughably bad. The sound effects, well, let's just say they're as forgettable as the moves you'll be trying to pull off. Mario is Missing, which was released on December 15th of 1992. Now, this isn't your typical Mario adventure, and let me tell you, that's the problem. Instead of jumping in Goombas and rescuing Princess Peach, you play as Luigi. Your mission? To find Mario who's been captured by Bowser. Sounds exciting, right? Well, not quite. Mario is missing is mostly a dull educational puzzle experience. You wander in various cities, learning geography and history instead of fighting enemies or collecting power-ups. And while education is great, this is a Mario game. Where's the action? Where's the fun? And now on to the number one worst NES game in my opinion, Dragon's Lair. Released on the NES in 1990, this game is infamous for its disappointing transition from a beloved Laserdisc classic. Now we can't talk about this one without talking about the original Dragon's Lair arcade game. It was groundbreaking for its time, featuring stunning animation and unique gameplay style. Players controlled the knight, Dirk the Daring, as he tries to rescue Princess Daphne from the evil dragon Singe. But the NES version, it was a whole different story. The NES version's graphics took a nosedive. Gone are the beautiful hand-drawn animations by the great Don Bluth that define the arcade version. Instead, we get blocky characters and dull backgrounds. The NES simply couldn't handle the original version's flair. The arcade version relied on quick-time events and player reaction. On the NES, these mechanics feel clunky and frustrating. Timing your inputs is crucial, but the game doesn't always respond as you'd hope. The gameplay is absolutely repetitive. You find yourself facing the same enemies and obstacles over and over and over. Not to mention the limited continues make it all the more punishing. It's like a bad dream of pixelated proportions. So what's my final verdict? The NES version of Dragon's Lair is a huge letdown, lacking the charm and innovation of its arcade counterpart. If you want to relive the magic, stick to the original. For the NES, it's a solid 1 out of 10. And there you have it! The 15 worst NES games of all time. Well, in my opinion. From frustrating controls to confusing gameplay, these titles remind us just how far gaming has come. Whether you've had the misfortune of playing these games or just love good laughs, we hope you enjoyed this nostalgic trip through gaming the rough patches. If you liked this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more retro gaming content. And don't forget to share your own worst NES experiences in the comments below. What games do you think deserve a spot on my list? Until next time, keep playing and remember, not every game can be a classic.